Morning, and welcome to the March 2012 meeting of the Federal Communications Commission, another on-time start within the margin of error. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda for this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, and good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes two items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking concerning the potential for harmful interference to lower 700 megahertz B and C block operations if the lower 700 megahertz band were interoperable, and whether, if such interference exists, it can be reasonably mitigated. The notice of proposed rulemaking also seeks comment on the best course of action should the Commission determine that interoperability would cause limited or no harmful interference to lower 700 MHz B and C block licensees, or that such interference can be reasonably mitigated. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking and notice of inquiry proposing service, technical assignment, and licensing rules for flexible terrestrial use of spectrum currently assigned to the mobile satellite service in the 2 gigahertz band, and an alternative band involving additional spectrum at 1695 to 1710 megahertz that the National Telecommunications and Information Administration has proposed to reallocate from federal to commercial use. This is your agenda for today. The first item on today's agenda will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Rick Kaplan, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Kaplan and team, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners McDowell and Clyburn. As always, we're pleased to present an item to you today, but actually not just one, but two, so we'll be here for a little while. First up today is the challenge of interoperability in the lower 700 megahertz band. It's an issue with which I know each of you are quite familiar, the development of different band classes in the lower 700 megahertz band. And the development that this caused that potentially impedes the full use of this very valuable spectrum. For us at the Wireless Bureau, we would like to move the ball along with this item and try and see if there are ways to mitigate the problems that may be there as a result of this development. And as you know, our motto in the Wireless Bureau is leave no megahertz behind, so we hope to have you adopt today's item. Joining me at the table today are Jim Schlichting, Senior Deputy Chief for the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Tom Peters, our Chief Engineer, Neshe Gunzelsberger, the Chief of the Bureau Spectrum and Competition Policy Division, Nicole McGinnis, Assistant Chief of the Division, and Brenda Boykin, Attorney Advisor in the Division. And Nicole will be presenting. Nicole?
Good morning. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I am pleased to present this notice of proposed rulemaking. In transitioning the 700 megahertz band from broadcast television use to commercial mobile services, the Commission set out certain goals, including facilitating access to spectrum by both small and large providers, providing for the efficient use of spectrum, and better enabling the delivery of broadband services. This notice seeks to further the Commission's goals for this spectrum by promoting interoperability in the lower 700 megahertz band. As indicated in the band plan on the screen, the lower 700 megahertz band consists of 48 megahertz of commercial spectrum with 3 blocks of 12 megahertz each of paired spectrum, the lower A, B, and C blocks, and 2 megahertz and 2 blocks of 6 megahertz each of unpaired spectrum, the lower D and E blocks. There are currently 2 3GPP LTE classes in the lower 700 megahertz band, providing 2 distinct sets of technical specifications for user equipment. Band Class 12 covers operations in the lower A, B, and C blocks, and Band Class 17 covers operations in the lower B and C blocks. With these 2 distinct band classes, the lower 700 megahertz band is not interoperable. The notice explores various options to help achieve the ultimate goal of interoperability. The notice primarily focuses on the threat of interference to customers of lower 700 MHz B and C block licensees that may result from the use of band class 12 devices on those networks, and seeks to determine the extent of that interference, if harmful interference exists, and whether it can be reasonably mitigated. The notice thus seeks comment on a number of technical and operational factors that could affect a transition to interoperability in the lower 700 MHz band. In particular, the notice seeks quantitative analyses regarding the magnitude and extent of the interference risk from Channel 51 and lower E block transmissions to band class 12 devices operating in the lower 700 MHz B and C block frequencies. The notice also asks whether there are measures the Commission should take to address the lower 700 MHz interference concerns that may be preventing the voluntary adoption of band class 12 by lower 700 MHz licensees. Aside from regulatory measures, the notice seeks comment on how the Commission can encourage voluntary industry efforts to find solutions to these interference concerns. Finally, the notice observes that an industry solution to the question of interoperability in the lower 700 MHz band is preferable, noting that it would allow for greater flexibility in responding to evolving consumer needs and technological developments. In the event additional steps by the Commission are warranted, the notice seeks comment on whether it would be necessary to require interoperability or whether there are other more flexible regulatory measures the Commission should consider. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt the notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good presentation and excellent work. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And all this beats having to fill out my second chance bracket, let me tell you that much. Anyway. I'm voting today to approve today's notice of proposed rulemaking regarding interoperable communications in the lower 700 megahertz band. I thank all the interested parties for sharing their insights and marketplace experiences on this topic. And I'm grateful to the chairman for his willingness to accept edits to create a more dispassionate analysis and thereby allow for more analytical comment, and especially for the generous comment time frame. A lot of these issues are highly technical in nature, and the three of us are liberal arts majors, so we're going to need that extra time to understand all those technicalities. Although I support today's actions, I hope that all interested parties will come to the negotiating table and work in good faith to develop their own solution. Government mandates should be a last resort. That maxim is especially relevant here because minimal regulation in the wireless sector has created an environment that has maximized opportunities for investment, innovation, competition, and job creation. Before disrupting this fruitful environment with new government mandates, all stakeholders, including industry and consumers, should work as hard as they can to produce a private sector solution. An independently created interoperability framework stands far better chance of success than would a top-down government regulation. In other words, the private sector is better at this than we are. In fact, we might not be here today were it not for earlier mandates handed down in July 2007, from which I dissented. Finally, in this case, I support our decision to refrain from including draft rules at this time. Putting forth proposed rules at this delicate stage may only distort the private sector's creative process. With this in mind, many of our questions are open-ended to elicit greater insight regarding the costs and technical feasibility of potential implementation. Accordingly, I approve of this prudent approach to develop the record further before drafting proposed rules. And always I thank Chief Kaplan and his lauded team over here, the valiant Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, for all their hard work on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Last month, Congress received much-deserved praise for passing legislation that gives the Commission authority to conduct voluntary incentive auctions. If finding new ways to repurpose spectrum for commercial mobile broadband services is a national priority, then removing a barrier to productive use of perhaps the most valuable spectrum the Commission has ever repurposed should be just as important. I am grateful to Chairman Janikowski for releasing this NPRM this quarter. Amy Levine, Rick Kaplan, and Tom Peters and others deserve special mention for leading the staff to prepare an NPRM that shows us a path towards resolving this interoperability issue. But the industry and the Commission owe the American consumers much more. They deserve resolution of the issues and an interoperable lower 700 megahertz band as quickly as possible. We have owed the American public the competition and innovation in the mobile broadband services that the 700 megahertz band promises since at least 2006, when the Commission initiated the proceeding to adopt service rules for the band. That proceeding was widely and closely followed, not just by communications licensees and the lawyers that frequently lobby the Commission. It also drew rapt attention from application developers, other technology innovators, and members of the public who do not often follow our proceedings. More than 250 different entities filed comments. Why? Because of the excellent propagation characteristics of the 700 megahertz band. The technical potential of this spectrum band is so great that the Commission tried to anticipate the impact that the acquisition of licenses for the band could have on competition throughout the mobile wireless ecosystem. The Commission found that wireless service providers have been requiring mobile device manufacturers to block consumer access to certain services such as Wi-Fi technology. Wi-Fi can improve the consumer experience by reducing network congestion and providing faster data throughput rates. Therefore, the Commission determined that the practice of blocking access to Wi-Fi was unrelated to reasonable network management or technical necessity and was an improper barrier to consumer choice. Accordingly, the Commission imposed an open access condition to the upper C block of the 700 megahertz band to encourage additional innovation and consumer choice at a critical stage in the evolution of wireless broadband services. Unfortunately, the Commission did not foresee another way that the 700 megahertz band could be used to harm consumer access to services. It did not anticipate there would be a standard setting process which would divide the lower 700 megahertz band and would impede the ability of devices for A block licenses to work on B block and C block networks. This lack of interoperability means fewer device and service choices for consumers. Fewer competitive options result in higher prices. The Commission's failure to anticipate the lack of interoperability was perhaps excusable in 2007 when it adopted the service rules for the 700 megahertz band. That is because, as this NPRM explains, since the early 1980s, the Commission has sent a strong message that it expects wireless service licensees to offer consumers equipment that was capable of operating over the entire range of an allocated spectrum band. As the Commission stated, such interoperability would, quote, ensure full coverage in all markets and compatibility on a nationwide basis. In any event, the Commission's failure to anticipate this particular anti-competitive development means the Commission needs to move as quickly as possible to achieve true interoperability in the lower 700 megahertz band. I understand the interest in giving the industry some time to arrive at a voluntary solution. I agree that, generally speaking, such an approach can offer market greater flexibility to respond to evolving consumer needs and fast-paced technological developments. But the industry has already had more than 4 years to find a solution. This industry knows how to arrive at interoperability. In fact, as I alluded to before, until the splintering of the lower 700 megahertz band occurred, the entire mobile wireless industry had been operating with the understanding that this Commission expects interoperability within all spectrum bands. Therefore, the staff should not only carefully but expeditiously consider and resolve the claims about interference from the Channel 51 licensees and from high-power operators in the lower E-block. The staff should also be vigilant in monitoring the industry effort to find a voluntary solution. This notice of proposed rulemaking provides sufficient notice about the rules the Commission might adopt if the industry does not achieve true interoperability across the lower 700 megahertz band. At a minimum, those are the goals the voluntary solution should achieve. We need to quickly arrive at an appropriate method to measure the progress of these efforts. If sufficient progress is not being made, we should not hesitate to adopt these proposed rules. I look forward to an industry solution or the adoption of rules by the end of this calendar year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. As my colleagues have pointed out, since the completion of the 700 megahertz auction in 2008, we've seen the emergence of two interoperable band classes for devices. This was an unanticipated development, and it's having consequences that raise real concerns. We've heard from providers in one of the bands, the A band, that the lack of interoperability is making it difficult to obtain mobile broadband devices, particularly new cutting-edge devices. That difficulty, they've said, is slowing mobile broadband rollouts and build-outs and making it harder for those providers to compete. And so this issue affects central FCC goals. To help facilitate solutions to the interoperability challenge, we have, over the past months, increased the agency's engagement with 3GPP, the principal mobile broadband standard setting body. That work has been led by some of the people at the table before us. To continue this work and to help drive toward a solution, today we initiate a proceeding on interoperability. A key issue, as the Bureau has explained, will be interference, whether a unified band class would result in harmful interference to lower 700 megahertz B and C block licensees, and whether, if interference exists, it reasonably can be mitigated. I hope and expect that industry will take the lead in developing an interoperability solution to allow for additional deployment of mobile broadband networks and increase the choice of providers available to consumers. An industry-led solution would be the preferable solution, and multiple stakeholders have indicated to the Commission that a unified band class could be a win-win if interference concerns are addressed. Of course, we're launching this proceeding because no solution has yet been reached, and we'll be closely monitoring progress in addition to developing a record as part of this proceeding. I'd like to thank Commissioner Clyburn for her strong work to bring this issue to the fore, and Commissioner McDowell for his constructive input that's reflected in this notice. Thank you to the staff for working on this item. I know you've been working on this issue for quite some time, trying to forge a solution. It's time to move to the next step. We hope that it will help trigger a resolution and bring interoperability to these bands. With that, let us proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. Thank you all for your work. Madam Secretary, please announce our next item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented jointly by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the International Bureau. It is entitled Service Rules for Advanced Wireless Services in the 2000 to 2020 megahertz and 2180 to 2200 megahertz bands, fixed and mobile services in the mobile satellite service bands.
All right, 2 for 2. Mr. Kaplan.
We'll see how it turns out. I won't count my chickens before they're hatched. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've all made clear on numerous occasions, one of the most pressing issues for the Commission, and indeed the nation, is to address the looming spectrum crunch. There's a variety of reasons why this is enormously important for us, obviously to remain a world leader in mobile, but also on a broader scale to drive our economy. There are a number of elements to achieving this goal, and perhaps none more important than clearing new spectrum for flexible use, including mobile broadband. I will assure you we do not take this challenge lightly. Freeing up spectrum is a massive effort. We believe that this item today we present on the S-band demonstrates our commitment to meeting that challenge and doing so in a smart way. Should you adopt today's item, we will work closely with all stakeholders, including our federal partners, to ensure that we keep our collective eyes on the ball about this incredible opportunity for our nation, and that we simply can't afford to pass up on. I do want to say, joining me at the table today, among others, Mindell De La Torre from the International Bureau. Pleased to have Mindell here with us. The Wireless Bureau and the International Bureau have a fantastic working relationship through the course of this proceeding and others. I think it's not just because we share the sixth floor together and they're the closest, but that we share these same goals that you've laid out for us. Also joining me at the table today are John Leibovitz, the Deputy Chief of the Wireless Bureau, Blaise Cinto, the Chief of our Broadband Division, Jerry Marcus, Assistant Chief of the Broadband Division in the Wireless Bureau, and Jeremy will be presenting the item to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am pleased to present to you the Advanced Wireless Services in the 2 GHz band, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and Notice of Inquiry. The item before you today proposes to make up to 40 megahertz of mobile satellite spectrum in the 2 GHz band available for mobile broadband. The NPRM builds upon Commission efforts to enable mobile broadband use in the 2000 to 2020 megahertz and 2180 to 2200 megahertz bands. First, the proposal would carry out a recommendation of the National Broadband Plan that the Commission enable the provision of standalone terrestrial services in this spectrum. Second, the NPRM directly follows on last April's 2 GHz band co-allocation order, in which the Commission laid the predicate for full terrestrial use in the 2 GHz band and stated its intention to propose service rules in a subsequent rulemaking, the one now before you. Given the proximity of the spectrum bands at issue to other AWS bands, we refer to these spectrum bands as AWS-4 or AWS-4 spectrum. The NPRM proposes to apply the Commission's Part 27 Flexible Use Wireless Service Rules to AWS-4 spectrum. The item then proposes various service rules, including a band plan, technical and interference rules, protection of existing licensees, assignment and licensing rules, and build-out requirements. First, the NPRM proposes a band plan that would maintain the existing spectrum pairing and uplink-downlink configuration of the spectrum. The NPRM also proposes to adopt paired 10 MHz blocks and to utilize geographic area licensing approach. Second, the draft addresses technical and interference rules, including protections of users in adjacent bands. Third, the item proposes to adopt a rule to protect the incumbent 2 GHz licensee from harmful interference. Fourth, the item proposes to assign AWS-4 licenses by modifying the existing 2 GHz MSS licenses, but also seeks comment on alternative assignment approaches. Fifth, the NPRM proposes a timely deployment schedule for the AWS-4 band, as well as appropriate corrective actions should such deployment fail to occur. Finally, the NPRM seeks comment on a variety of other service rule matters such as secondary markets, license term, and renewal criteria. The item also includes a proposed notice of inquiry where we would seek comment on a variation on the AWS-4 band plan proposed in the NPRM. The NOI incorporates the 1695 to 1710 megahertz band that the National Telecommunications and Information Administration has proposed to reallocate from federal use to non-federal use. The NOI's proposed spectrum concept would potentially result in existing AWS-1 and PCS bands and extending them with 65 megahertz of usable bandwidth. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And let's proceed. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, of course, as we all know, Americans are consuming more of the airwaves than ever before through powerful new mobile broadband devices. Our appetite for spectrum seems insatiable. Today, the FCC takes a small but important step towards satisfying that hunger. With mobile broadband in mind, since my arrival at the Commission, I've advocated for more flexible use standards when adopting spectrum policy. The Commission has a checkered past of micromanaging spectrum use, only to find years later that technical innovation and market demands have evolved past the government's myopic view. Exploring ways to allow for dynamic uses of valuable frequencies while preventing harmful interference to other licensees and users is a laudable goal. Our notice of proposed rulemaking liberating the 2 GHz band, rebranding it today as AWS-4, for possible terrestrial broadband use is a step in the right direction. I commend Chairman Janikowski for bringing forward this comprehensive deregulatory and broadly applicable proposal. But it didn't stop there. He has also put forth today's notice of inquiry on a proposed quote, 2 gigahertz extension band concept, end quote. Now, that's not quite as catchy as AWS-4, so we'll work on the branding of that name. But anyway, that incorporates an idea from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to reallocate 1695 to 1710 megahertz from federal to commercial use. I look forward to learning from all interested parties on these timely proposals. And again, I thank the tireless Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, as well as the International Bureau, and as well as our friends at NTIA for all of your thoughtful and creative work on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. By adopting this notice of proposed rulemaking and notice of inquiry, the Commission makes substantial progress towards allocating up to 40 megahertz of spectrum for commercial mobile broadband services. I commend Rick Kaplan, John Leibovitz, and the staff of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, joined by the International Bureau, for presenting an item with such a careful examination of the technical issues relevant to repurposing this satellite spectrum. The NPRM contains detailed rule proposals about the band plan, spectrum block size, and technical service requirements. Although this item will likely require review and input from the industry over the next few months, these detailed proposals should help the Commission move quicker towards adopting rules in this proceeding. This item asks several important questions about how to allocate the spectrum to promote competition and facilitate entry by small businesses in the mobile broadband services market. I am grateful to the other offices for agreeing with my request to seek comment about how the Commission can ensure interoperability within the AWS-4 band. I am interested in hearing from the commenters if the small bidding credits proposed in the NPRM are sufficient to facilitate new entities entering the mobile wireless service industry. I also encourage parties to tell me what service rules for this spectrum could have the greatest beneficial impact on rural service. Another important feature in the NPRM is a proposal to provide AWS-4 licensees with flexibility to provide any fixed or mobile service that is consistent with the allocations for this spectrum. I support giving licensees the dexterity to adjust to market conditions. This principle serves the public interest when licensees use this flexibility in order to provide consumers with greater competition, more products and services, and lower prices. If we need to adopt additional rules to sufficiently foster competition, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. For the past 3 years, this Commission has pushed relentlessly to free up spectrum for broadband. We've been working to address the spectrum crunch and to enable the continued acceleration of the mobile revolution that is driving economic growth, investment, and valuable new services for consumers and businesses. With this item today, we're moving to free up 40 megahertz of 2 gigahertz spectrum for mobile broadband, a significant step in the Commission spectrum agenda. We're looking at freeing up another 15 megahertz, thanks to the work of NTIA and our team here in the 1695 to 1710 band, 40 today, 15 coming. Consider that the 700 megahertz auction in conjunction with the DTV transition freed up about 70 megahertz for broadband. So we're talking about more than half as much spectrum in this item alone as that important digital dividend. It's at a different place in the spectrum chart, but it's a significant amount. Today's NPRM proposes freeing up spectrum by removing regulatory barriers and providing for flexible use of the MSS spectrum at 2 gigahertz. The specific barriers we propose to remove are rules that have limited this spectrum to satellite use. This effort is part of the Commission's broad commitment to allow flexible use of spectrum, to remove barriers to market-based spectrum allocations and decisions. Because of the international allocation for mobile broadband and the large blocks of contiguous spectrum in the 2 gigahertz band, the National Broadband Plan recommended that we remove regulatory barriers to flexible use in this band through a rulemaking, and we do so today. Addressing the growing demand for spectrum use is hard work, and freeing up spectrum for broadband isn't easy. And that's why we must and we are pursuing multiple strategies to unleash spectrum for broadband. Removing outdated rules to free up spectrum is one of the many strategies the Commission has been and will continue to use. In addition to freeing up spectrum for licensed use, we've also, by removing unnecessary regulatory barriers, freed up white spaces spectrum, the largest release of unlicensed spectrum in 25 years. And we work also to maximize the potential of traditional Wi-Fi, which is playing more and more of a positive role in relieving issues driven by spectrum demand. Another strategy, incentive auctions, a market-based mechanism to reallocate spectrum for flexible use. And Congress, of course, recently gave the FCC the authority to conduct the world's first incentive auctions. We're also committed to removing barriers to the build-out of mobile broadband infrastructure. We've taken many steps. This past August, for example, we adopted an order to remove barriers to use of spectrum for wireless backhaul, which will help accelerate the deployment of 4G networks across the country. We're also encouraging the rapid deployment of new infrastructure and device technologies that increase efficient spectrum use and help address the demand curve, such as small cell networks and software-defined radio. We're working with NTIA and our federal partners to free up more government spectrum for flexible commercial use and to enable spectrum sharing. Today, the Commission builds on this work and reasserts our unanimous commitment to freeing up spectrum for mobile broadband to grow our economy and enhance our global competitiveness. We aim to bring this proceeding to a close expeditiously. I look forward to working with my colleagues here on the Commission and all stakeholders, both inside and outside government, to get this spectrum in use quickly. I want to thank the many staff who've worked on this at the Commission, the Wireless Bureau, as well as the International Bureau, as well as other bureaus and offices. This is a very important item. I thank my commissioners for their input and the staff in my office and on the 8th floor. We have a lot of work to do, but it's important that we move quickly. Unless there's any more discussion, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. So ordered, and the request for editorial privileges is granted. And thank you. You're welcome to stay or free to go. That concludes the two items on the agenda today. I do have an announcement. We have some personnel announcements, and I believe my fellow commissioners have some comments as well. I'm very pleased to announce the formation of an incentive auction task force, and that Ruth Milkman has already begun to manage the task force and our implementation of incentive auctions on an interim basis. Implementing incentive auction authority involves most of the bureaus and offices at the FCC. The same was true of the work to develop the incentive auction concept as part of the National Broadband Plan and to provide expert support to Congress as it worked to pass the legislation. I want to acknowledge and thank the FCC staff who have worked so hard on this effort, both present and former. The passage of the legislation 2 weeks ago is testament to a tremendous amount of terrific conceptual, technical, and other work. I'd also like to thank in advance FCC staff who are working and will work on implementation. Incentive auctions are a big idea. The concept, of course, as I mentioned, which we developed in our National Broadband Plan, is to deploy market forces and a market-based mechanism to repurpose spectrum for flexible use, including mobile broadband. But there's no doubt that the task ahead will be complex and challenging. Incentive auctions are unprecedented. The legislation at over 100 pages raises many difficult issues. Now, I'm confident that our staff is up to the challenge. What we'll see is an implementation process that will be inclusive and participatory, that will be guided by the economics and the engineering, and that will seek to maximize the opportunity to unleash investment and innovation, benefit consumers, drive economic growth, and enhance our global competitiveness. When the incentive auction of the TV bands is complete, we expect to have a healthy broadcast sector and a strong, robust, competitive, and world-leading mobile industry. I couldn't be more grateful to Ruth Milkman for taking on this task. Ruth is, of course, well-known and respected throughout this community for her deep knowledge and experience, strong management skills, and fair-mindedness. The task force represents the full range of talent and expertise at the agency, including Rick Kaplan and Bill Lake, the leaders of our wireless, telecommunications, and media bureaus, Julie Knapp, the head of our Office of Engineering and Technology, our chief economist, Maria Schwartz, and our chief technologist, Henning Schultzren, our general counsel, Austin Schlick, and others. Thanks to each of you and your terrific teams. Thank you again, Ruth, for once again stepping up and meeting the need not only of the Commission but of the country. We look forward to hearing more from the team as the work progresses. And with that, let me ask if my colleagues have any comments on Ruth or on the...
Sure. Just quickly, of course, incorporate by reference and agree with everything the chairman just said. It truly is a monumental piece of legislation. It is groundbreaking. These will be the most complex spectrum auction or auctions literally in the history of the world. One can't be too hyperbolic with that statement there. So, Ruth, I just want to make sure you know exactly what you're getting into. I can't think of anyone more qualified to lead the implementation of that law. I know you will be imaginative and intelligent, brilliant, and tireless. And you've already advised your team that they will have no personal lives for the next few years, right? So that's a good thing. But in all seriousness, you will do an excellent job. I think it's an excellent choice. Ruth is an excellent choice. And so we look forward to working with all of you on this. And it's very exciting. The future is very bright for what can come about as a result of these incentive auctions.
Terrific. Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn?
Yes, I would like to join you in thanking a very respected and talented leader in this industry. We all were rejoicing when Congress awarded us or gave us authority to conduct voluntary and incentive auctions. But this historic move, as we all knew, it comes with a tremendous obligation to deliver unprecedented public benefits to this nation. And so when you affirmed that Ruth Milkman would be named, I was a little bit more comfortable with this, with the road ahead. Ruth, you're a tremendous leader and a brilliant advocate, and I cannot think of a more capable person to lead the charge. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. And I have a couple of other personnel announcements. We have.
Sure. I have nothing.
You have nothing?
I'm not aware of any.
All right. So let me retain the floor here. Let me begin. I got a couple of goodbyes and a couple of welcomes. First, Jessica Almond. I don't know if Jessica's here. There we go. Jessica. Well, the good news is Jessica's not leaving the FCC, so let me make that perfectly clear. But Jessica has completed a very, very successful rotation in the chairman's office. Jessica came to us from the Media Bureau, part of our ongoing effort to identify the most talented people at the agency and forbid them from sleeping for about a year and then sending them off to back to their lives. We brought Jessica in to lead our work on FCC reform. We gave Jessica the unenviable task of filling the shoes of Mary Beth Richards, who had done such a terrific job while she was here. And I have to say, Jessica more than delivered on the significant responsibilities we gave her to lead this effort. She spearheaded our efforts to eliminate more than 200 outdated rules, to identify more than 2 dozen data collections for elimination, to reduce agency backlogs. This is not easy work. And there's just no way we would have made anywhere near as much progress without Jessica's hard work, dedication, commitment, deep knowledge of the agency, ability to work with people across the agency to help constantly improve our processes. Jessica was also responsible for our work on this. She was responsible for it both before the president issued an executive order saying this was all a good idea, and after. Just couldn't be more pleased by Jessica's work. Jessica, as I mentioned, fortunately will be staying at the commission. Her background, her skills, her intelligence, her versatility will serve her well in her new role as Chief of Staff for the Wireless Bureau. Rick probably neglected to inform you that there's even more going on in the Wireless Bureau than there is in the on the 8th floor. So good luck and thank you. Rotating in for Jessica will be Lyle Elder, another high draft pick from the Media Bureau. Lyle has been in the policy. Where's Bill? I'm so sorry, Bill. I don't know how you're going to get anything done. Lyle's been working on a range of rulemakings in the Media Bureau, particularly those involving broadcasting, carriage, consumer issues. Lyle was extensively involved in our DTV transition efforts as principal author of several important rulemakings and as the director of outreach efforts for the East Central region. Lyle is a graduate of the University of Virginia and the University of Chicago Law School. I have not asked him who his constitutional law professor was, nor did I think a recommendation was necessary. Well, thank you for joining the effort. We look very much forward to working with you in the months ahead. Now a goodbye that I wish on behalf of all of us I didn't have to recite, to go through, endure. Amy Levine. So Amy, almost everyone here knows because Amy has worked for many years very successfully as a first-rate lawyer at an excellent private law firm here in town, in Congress, and at the FCC. I have to be careful how I talk about the last election, but there was one result that in some respects was very, very unfortunate. Rick Boucher, who we all worked with very well and very closely, but it did allow us to, the silver lining was that Amy was left without employment. And we jumped quickly, maybe not in a way we should be proud of, very, very quickly, to induce Amy to come and work at the FCC because we knew how beneficial to our work Amy's knowledge, background, intelligence, consensus building, just deep expertise would be. And that's, of course, what we've seen over the last year and a half. Amy has worked on so many issues, not only the ones she was responsible for, but in giving advice and guidance to the other staff in our office on other issues, to her colleagues on the 8th floor, and to lots of people throughout the Commission. Amy was very active and engaged as the Commission worked to provide support to Congress as it considered the incentive auction legislation. Amy led a number of important public safety initiatives at the agency, including the terrific work on transitioning to Next Generation 911, the accelerated deployment of a wireless emergency alert system, and more. It goes without saying that we will all miss Amy deeply. I know that she'll continue to deliver the same expert counsel and commitment that she brought to the Commission at the next stage of her career. It appears from my notes that I'm not allowed to reveal the next destination. But I know that it is a great thing and reflects very well on Amy and her great work. So thank you, Amy, very much. Stepping in for Amy as acting legal advisor is a veteran of the 8th floor, someone we all know very well, Charles Mathias. Charles has worked and done excellent work at the agency for more years than he would care to admit. Let's just say it's more than 3 or 4. But very few people at the agency know as much as Charles does about both how the agency works and about the substantive issues that the agency faces, particularly around wireless. Charles also has experience on the 8th floor serving as senior legal advisor to Commissioner Baker. So I'm just delighted that Charles has agreed to temporarily support our office on Amy's departure on a personal level. I'm very much looking forward to working with Charles, who I've gotten to know at the Commission. I know that's true of all of us in the Chairman's office. And we feel very fortunate that while Amy is not replaceable, that we are nevertheless in great shape because of the talent we have at the Commission. With that, and I know my colleagues join me in those remarks, and let me ask our Madam Secretary to announce the date of the next FCC meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Friday, April 27th, 2012.
Terrific. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
There's been a lot of speculation lately about how much spectrum you'll get back in the incentive auctions. You'll free up broadcast spectrum. The broadband plan had talked about 120 megahertz. There's been speculation because of the coordination requirements in the legislation that you might get more like 60 to 80. Can you give us a sense whether you think whether the hope is still to get 120, or is that probably too optimistic in terms of reality as far as the broadcast spectrum?
You know, we don't have an estimate. As you know, I've expressed a number of times concern that the legislation contains provisions that will constrain us from maximizing the amount of spectrum recovered. So we'll be working hard on that. It's going to be about the engineering, working within the provisions that Congress has adopted. Again, as I said, our staff believes, and I believe, that the law as adopted constrains our ability to maximize the amount of spectrum we can recover.
Hey, Les Craven, Politico. How are you today, Chairman?
I'm doing good.
That's not my question. So can you tell us more specifics about how the incentive auction task force will work and any benchmarks and timing we can look for?
Well, as I mentioned earlier today, implementing the legislation is a multi-bureau, multi-office effort. It is unprecedented. It obviously involves not only the Wireless Bureau, but the Media Bureau, our Office of Engineering and Technology, and so that it's important that it be a coordinated, organized, efficient, and streamlined effort. That's why we formed the task force. It's why I asked Ruth Milkman to lead the task force. Now, the work they're doing now is analyzing the legislation. It's over 100 pages. I think it's closer to 150 pages. And organizing an implementation plan that will meet the objectives I talked about in my remarks earlier. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's going to be a complex, challenging task. The statute creates a number of challenges and difficult issues that we'll have to address. But we're privileged at the FCC to have the responsibility of implementing the legislation. We're proud that the idea originated at the FCC. Our job is to faithfully implement the statute and working within the statute to maximize the opportunities to free up spectrum, to drive investment and innovation, and to meet the goals of the incentive auction law. And I think at some point, I don't know if Ruth is going to do it today, but of course at some point Ruth will be available to answer questions about the process. But we're still very much in the planning stage.
Hi, I'm Brina Lee. I'm the new tech reporter at CQ.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I don't
First time in the FCC?
Right.
All right.
So I don't have a specific question, but I am interested in this concept of making spectrum more flexible.
Yeah.
And can you just talk a little bit about that vision and how the FCC is working towards it?
It's a good question. And as some of your colleagues know, I could speak for about a half hour on this, and I'll try. I'll try not to. But for a very long time, the FCC allocated spectrum on sort of a command and control basis, saying this block of spectrum should be used exactly for that. And over the last period of time, we've recognized very broadly that that's not a sensible way to go, and that we should maximize the flexible use of spectrum to allow innovators, companies, investors, and the market to determine the best uses of spectrum. And so the adoption of auctions as a policy in the 1990s was an important step toward moving to flexible use. Providing spectrum for on an unlicensed basis also supports flexible use, and so it's a very central part of how we think about getting this important asset onto the market so that innovators and others can make the best use of it. In the spirit of the divergence in history, one of the ways to look at the incentive auction legislation that Congress passed recently is as one of the next big policy innovations in the space. We saw auctions; they've had tremendous value. Unlicensed, low-power Wi-Fi has had tremendous value. Now incentive auctions as a mechanism to reallocate spectrum from less efficient, less optimized uses to flexible mobile broadband is a new major policy innovation. And the other that I've mentioned that we're very excited about is higher-powered Wi-Fi, longer-distance Wi-Fi, what we call white spaces, but where there continue to be tremendous opportunities for that to be an enormous platform for innovation in the future, both along the lines of what we know to be Wi-Fi, but on a broader basis, but also as a platform for seeing the invention of new uses that we can't even anticipate now, which is, of course, what happened with Wi-Fi. When unlicensed spectrum was put on the market initially, no one said this is going to be used for Wi-Fi. So I apologize for the long answer, but it's an important topic.
Hi, Chairman. Paul Barbagallo, BNA. On the interoperability item, in your statement you made note of the 3GPP industry standard-setting body, which created the 4 band classes within the 700 megahertz band. The proponents of device interoperability, including the smaller rural regional carriers, have faulted the 3GPP for their earlier decisions. And some have suggested that for this reason they've been unable to buy gear, devices, and so on. Do you agree with them? Do you share their concerns?
Well, I think everyone agrees that the development of interoperable bands coming out of the 700 megahertz auction was not an anticipated or a desirable outcome, and that interoperability is the goal. We heard that unanimously from the commissioners today. I know that 3GPP continues to look at it. The stakeholders continue to look at it. There are some concrete issues like interference that have to be addressed, as we mentioned in the item today. So we're hopeful that I think you heard the same thing from all 3 commissioners, which is that interoperability is important. We'd prefer to see a private industry-led solution, but we all believe that the appropriate thing today was to act to launch this proceeding because an industry-led solution hasn't yet arrived. We're all hopeful that this will become a vehicle and a spur to achieve interoperability in the band. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chairman Janikowski. I'd like to invite the Wireless Bureau up, the interoperability team, Rip Kaplan and his group, to come up.
My team has shrunk. We're down to 2. Hey.
So on the interoperability item is some of the parties said, T-Mobile and some others said, well, don't limit it to just the lower band, which has gotten a lot of the focus, of course, because of 3GPP. Does the item seek questions about the upper band as well?
We ask a couple of very general questions about it. The item's focused on the lower band. It doesn't really address the upper band. So as you'll see when it comes out, which should be today, there are a couple of quick questions, but really the focus is on the lower band.
Got a two-parter.
Oh, should I take notes?
Get excited. So the first question is, in your notice of inquiry, there I know there are a portion of spectrum that's licensed to Dish, and this is
this is on the other item.
Well, but it's related.
Oh, this is on the interoperability. Okay.
But this is just for interoperability.
We're starting with the first item and then the last question.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll save my questions for
Okay.
the second one then. We'll come back to that.
Any other interoperability? Well, I can invite everyone else.
I have a kind of a legal question on the interoperability item, and kind of a general issue, which is in the docket so far, some parties have claimed that the Commission lacks the statutory authority to require device interoperability, to essentially mandate that carriers or manufacturers make a certain handset that is compatible with a certain band. And I'm just curious, as you review this item and the comments that come in, obviously legal authority is going to be a big question. So I'm curious what you're going to look at, what you're looking for, in the comments in terms of legal analysis, legal underpinnings to perhaps go forward in the future.
Sure, Jim, if you want to address it specifically, but we do ask a number of questions about the legal authority. We threw out, in the record actually wasn't, and when I say the record, I mean this is in some ways the beginning of a proceeding, but in the course of other proceedings and putting out the petition for comment, we did get a number of comments in. The claims on both sides weren't necessarily particularly specific, so we ask a number of questions about the different areas of authority where we think we may have it, and so there's a section on legal authority that asks just essentially a number of questions and where we think the sources of authority would be, and then where the questions on that authority would be as well. I don't know if you want anything more specific, but you'll see there are several paragraphs on that.
Yeah, and part of it may depend on what the next steps the Commission might consider doing. I mean, the question of what industry can do, and then we're also seeking comment about what the Commission can do, and obviously the question of what our legal authority might be to undertake any of various actions might depend on which particular action we might think would be fruitful to undertake.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We'll move on to.
Okay, no more on this item. Is anybody else who will take questions on the AWS item? And I did want to mention that press releases are being finalized. We'll email those out as soon as they're ready.
Yes, go on.
It takes 5 of us to replace one,
Sure.
Rick, would the flexibility for Dish be across the entire 40 megahertz that we're talking about, the terrestrial flexibility?
Yes, it applies to the entire band.
Okay.
Two-parter.
The two-parter. So the NOI has some Dish spectrum included in that band plan discussion, and then there's also the hope to finish the notice of proposed rulemaking on Dish by the end of the year. Where will that leave Dish in terms of the portion of its spectrum that's being considered in the NOI? Like, how will they know what they're able to do?
How do they interact?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to address it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see when the item comes out, there's some actually text that addresses this. I think our goal is to move to a timely resolution of the proposal, but we didn't want to miss the opportunity to put out an alternative concept and just take comment on it. We asked basically that we frame up the alternative in the context of, without, sort of delaying the proposal. How that we asked some questions about that. How could we consider implementation of that proposal? So, in other words, the question you ask, we ask in the item.
Okay.
But we only asked one part. I don't know what the second part is. So.
And I guess and just another way of putting that is recognizing that we don't want to slow this item down, which is why we asked that question. How could we, if there's some alternate concept, how can we do it? And
that's exactly
timely
that's what it says.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And, sort of Dish has promoted the fact that they don't have the same interference problems that Light Squared faced. But correct me if I'm wrong, some of that was, or that will be addressed, possible interference issues in the interim. What are those,
Well, I think that's why we open up the proceeding to figure out what interference issues there are. I mean, the specific issues that you see in the L-band, it's in a different location, so you're not going to have the same issues. But as we've seen before, things when you're trying to free up spectrum crawl out of the woodwork. So we're open to anticipating the unanticipated. So I think your guess in some ways is as good as ours. But the initial indications, and again, what you should be looking at is when Dish filed for their application for their license transfer and for their waiver application, we put it out for comment, and it was open proceeding. So not a lot flooded in there. That's when you imagine people are going to imagine, because if we granted a waiver, we'd be in a similar, on one level of generality, we'd be in a similar place because they would launch a network that they want to launch, et cetera, et cetera. So, but we'll see what happens. We never know. Sometimes things happen later than we expect, and we'll be ready to see what comes in the comments.
And what about the build-out requirements? Can you speak? I mean, I know they had one similar to Sprint. AT&T said, no, you need to do it Light Squared. We haven't seen it yet. What's in there? Give us a sense of the build-out.
You'll see exactly what you said. We asked for comment on the various proposals that are out there, and also looking at commission precedent and the different our focus on getting the spectrum built out, especially in the era of a spectrum crunch.
So you didn't suggest a specific.
Well, we do. We proposed one. We proposed one.
There's a proposal which is sort of in between the two.
Not exactly in between.
Not exactly in between,
yes.
Which I think when Rick was referring to commission precedent, we looked at, other bands and so forth, and coming up with that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure. That was a three-parter.
I did laugh.
So Rick, on the question of interference, and with the understanding that it's still early, the notice has to go out and comments come in, and anything can change. Based on your understanding and analysis of the bands, and the L band is quite different than the S band. Do you imagine a scenario in which testing will be required? And I know that's a loaded question, but to see if terrestrial use in this band interferes with PCS?
Again, interferes with PCS. That would be.
Or because right, I mean, we're talking about cellular. On one side, we're talking about cellular interference.
I think it's fair to say, look, if you look at the band plan, the chart we had up earlier, there are a number of band adjacencies, both on the uplink and the downlink side. We ask a number of questions about interference potential on all of those borders, both ways, out and in, and so into the neighboring bands and from the neighboring bands into the bands, and so I think as you go through, you live and learn from past experiences. You learn about more types of things, and we try to just ask a whole bunch of questions so that we're not, we're giving everyone in the community an opportunity to come in and tell us if there's an issue, and if there is, we also ask for technical analysis to explain in detail what the issue is.
Right, and again, back to what Eliza was asking about before, you never know. So in this instance, in the record, in the waiver record, GPS, in the GPS instance specifically, came in and said, "Oh, we support it. You should grant the waiver, and you should let them, develop this huge network." So GPS may not be the issue, but we're always have our eyes open to see. We're not going to narrowly focus on one service over another, and we're open to it. But again, if we see it, we're going to identify it quickly, hopefully, and work as hard as we can to develop reasonable solutions, because this is very important spectrum, and the opportunities are few and far between, and we've got to grab them all.
So you're not worried about generals actually coming to your house as you would be in the
not this time. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, maybe just like colonels or something like that.
You never know. We are on the flight path here, and so you never know what can happen. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That concludes our press conference. Thanks.